The stars had always been silent. For 300 years, humanity had sent signals into the darkness, hopping for an answer. They built telescopes that could see the birth of galaxies. They sent probes to the edges of their solar system. They dreamed of meeting other minds among the stars. Admiral Park had spent his entire life believing that first contact would be humanity's greatest moment. He had trained for it. He had prepared speeches. He had imagined shaking hands with beings from distant worlds, sharing knowledge, building bridges across the void. He never imagined it would feel like this. The alien fleet appeared without warning on a cold morning in March 2247. One moment the sky was empty. The next, 3,000 ships hung above Earth like a steel ceiling. They blocked the sun over Asia. Their shadows fell across cities where millions of people stopped and stared upward, not knowing whether to celebrate or scream. Stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station 7, humanity's largest structure in space. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the alien vessels clearly. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Their hulls shimmered with colors that had no names in any human language. Some were shaped like great wings. Others looked like crystals grown to impossible sizes. The smallest of them was larger than any ship humanity had ever built. "Sir," the voice belonged to Doctor, the station's chief translator. She was a small woman with tired eyes and steady hands. In the 48 hours since the fleet arrived, she had not slept. "We've finished decoding their message." Turned from the window and handed him a tablet. Her face told him everything he needed to know before he read a single word. The message was not a greeting. It was not an invitation to join a community of stars. It was a demand. Humanity was to immediately stop all weapons development. They were to dismantle their small fleet of exploration vessels. They were to surrender control of their moon bases and orbital stations. In exchange, they would be granted provisional membership in something called the Galactic Concord, an alliance of 12 spacefaring species that had governed this region of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. The terms of this membership were clear. Humans would provide labor and resources. They would not be allowed to travel beyond their own solar system without permission. They would accept guidance from senior species in matters of government, science, and culture. Any resistance would be met with necessary correction. "They're calling it an honor," said. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. "They say most species are simply destroyed when they're discovered. We're being offered a chance to survive." Read the message 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. "How long do we have to respond?" 48 hours. He set down the tablet and looked back at the alien fleet. In his 30 years of service, had faced many enemies. Pirates who raided cargo ships, separatist groups who wanted independence from Earth's government, natural disasters that killed thousands, but he had never faced anything like this. "Have they explained why?" he asked. Nodded slowly. "They've been watching us for a long time, sir. Decades, maybe longer. They've seen our wars, our weapons, the way we fight among ourselves." She paused. "They think we're dangerous." "Dangerous?" Almost laughed. "We can barely reach Mars. Our fastest ship would take 10,000 years to reach the nearest star. How could we possibly threaten them?" "It's not what we are now that frightens them." Pulled up another document on her tablet, an analysis prepared by Earth's top psychologists and diplomats. "It's what we might become. Every other species they've encountered either surrendered immediately or was destroyed. We're different. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived wars that should have ended us. We keep coming back, stronger each time." She looked up at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "They've never seen anything like us, and they're afraid of what happens if they give us time to grow." The next 2 days were chaos. News of the ultimatum spread across Earth within hours. Some people panicked. Some prayed. Some demanded that their governments fight back, even though everyone knew that humanity's entire military could not scratch the paint on a single alien ship. In the great cities of Earth, crowds gathered in the streets. They held signs in 100 languages. Some begged for surrender, others called for war. Most simply stood in silence, looking up at the sky where their future hung in the balance. Admiral was called to Seoul for an emergency meeting of the United Earth Council. He flew down on a shuttle that felt like a toy compared to the alien vessels above. Through the window, he could see the shadow of the fleet stretching across the Korean peninsula like a bruise. The council chamber was built from the ruins of the old world and the dreams of the new. Its walls were made of recycled steel and reclaimed wood. Its ceiling was glass, open to the stars that humanity had always loved. Now those stars were hidden behind alien hulls. President sat at the head of the table. She was 63 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a simple knot and eyes that had seen too much suffering to show fear. She had led humanity through the resource wars of the 2220s. She had rebuilt nations that had fallen to famine and disease. She had never backed down from any challenge. But this was different from anything she had faced before. "We've received additional information from the conquered," she announced as the council members took their seats. "They've sent us records of what happened to other species who refused their offer." She activated a holographic display. The images that appeared made several council members look away. Worlds burned to ash, civilizations erased, entire species reduced to museum exhibits, kept alive in small numbers as examples of what happened to those who resisted. "They gave up there to join the conquered," continued. "They live now on stations, serving as administrators. They surrendered their fleet and became traders, carrying goods between other species' worlds. They were required to abandon their children to be raised by conquered instructors, ensuring loyalty across generations." She turned off the display. "This is what membership means. This is the honor they're offering us." Silence filled the chamber. Could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Finally, an old voice spoke. Minister was 91 years old, the eldest member of the council. He had been born during the darkest days of Earth's history and had watched humanity climb back from the edge of extinction. "What do they expect from us?" he asked, truly. Answered before anyone else could speak. "They expect us to beg." The words hung in the air like smoke. "They've seen what we are," he continued. "They know we're fighters, they know we're survivors, so they're giving us a chance to prove that we can be broken, that we can be tamed." He shook his head slowly. "If we accept their terms, we won't just be surrendering our ships and our stations. We'll be surrendering everything that makes us human." President studied his face for a long moment. "And if we refuse?" "Then they'll destroy us. At least that's what they think." "You have another idea." Looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders, scientists and soldiers, diplomats and dreamers, people who had dedicated their lives to building a future among the stars. "Maybe," he said, "but it's going to require something none of them expect. It's going to require us to be more human than we've ever been before." Outside the chamber windows, the alien fleet waited, and humanity began to plan. The council chamber remained sealed for 16 hours. No one left. No one slept. The fate of 8 billion people rested on the decisions made within those walls. Commander Lee arrived at hour 4, summoned from her posting at the Mars Defense Station. She was 42 years old, young for her rank, with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek from a pirate raid 6 years ago. She had never lost a ship under her command. She had never retreated from any battle. But she had also never faced an enemy that could not be defeated. "Commander Lee," President said as took her seat, "you've reviewed the tactical analysis." "I have, Madam President." "And your assessment?" Looked around the table. She saw hope in some faces, fear in others. A few seemed already defeated, their eyes empty, their hands trembling. "If we fight, we lose," she said simply. Their smallest ships carry weapons that could crack our planet in half. Their shields can withstand anything we have. We could throw every missile, every bomb, every weapon humanity has ever built at them, and it would mean nothing. A murmur of despair ran through the chamber, but continued, and the word silenced everyone. Fighting is not our only option. Minister leaned forward. You're suggesting we surrender. No, his voice was hard as steel. I'm suggesting we leave. The confusion on the council members' faces was almost funny. Almost. Leave? Someone asked. Leave where? We barely have the technology to reach our own outer planets. We can't outrun them. We can't hide from them. Not with the technology they know about, said. She stood and walked to the holographic display. With a few commands, she brought up a map of Earth's solar system. Red dots marked every known human installation: moon bases, orbital stations, Mars colonies, research outposts on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. This is what they see when they scan us, explained. This is what they've been watching for decades: a primitive species, barely able to crawl from one rock to another. She entered another command. The map changed. New dots appeared. Green ones hidden among asteroids buried beneath moons floating in the darkest corners of space where no one thought to look. There were dozens of them, then hundreds, then thousands. The council members stared in stunned silence. Project Silent Step, said. Begun 60 years ago, after our first deep space probes detected signs of alien civilizations. Our best scientists realized that any species capable of crossing between stars would be far more advanced than us. They also realized that such species might not be friendly. She zoomed in on one of the green dots. It revealed a massive structure hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, a shipyard, filled with vessels unlike anything humanity had publicly built. For 60 years, we've been preparing in secret, building ships with experimental drives, developing technology we never revealed to anyone, creating a backup plan in case the stars turned hostile. Admiral felt his heart beating faster. He had heard rumors of secret projects, black budgets, research stations that didn't officially exist, but he had never imagined anything like this. How is this possible? He asked. How could we hide something this big? Because we had to, answered. Because we knew this day might come, and because humans are very, very good at keeping secrets when our survival depends on it. President rose from her chair. Her face showed no surprise. She had known about Project Silent Step, had helped protect it during her years in government. Now she understood why that protection had been so important. Tell them about the drives, she said too. Nodded. Conventional physics says that faster-than-light travel is impossible, and with conventional technology, that's true. But 23 years ago, a research team working in one of our hidden facilities discovered something unexpected. She brought up a new image, a swirling pattern of light and energy that seemed to fold in on itself. They found a way to step outside normal space, not to travel faster than light but to go around it entirely, to create a bubble that exists in a different dimension where the rules are different. She paused. We call it fold technology, and with it we can go anywhere, instantly. The chamber erupted in questions. How was this possible? Why hadn't anyone been told? How many ships had this capability? Raised her hand for silence. The Conquered doesn't know about any of this. Their scans show only what we wanted them to see, a weak, primitive species with no hope of escape. They think they have us trapped. A small smile crossed her face. They're wrong. Minister spoke again, his old voice cutting through the excitement. Even if we can escape, where will we go? The galaxy is vast, but the Conquered controls much of it. They'll hunt us. They'll find us eventually. No, said, they won't. She changed the display one more time. The solar system disappeared, replaced by a map of the entire galaxy. Then that map pulled back, showing the galaxy as just one island of light among countless others. The Concord controls this galaxy, said, pointing to the familiar spiral shape. But there are billions of other galaxies out there, places they've never been, places they can't reach. She let that sink in. Fold technology doesn't just work within the galaxy, it works between them. We've already sent probes to 3 neighboring galaxies. We've found planets that can support human life. We've been preparing safe havens for years, just in case. You're suggesting we abandon our home, someone said. Everything we've built, everything we've ever known. Turned to face the speaker. Her eyes were calm, but there was fire behind them. I'm suggesting we survive, and not just survive, I'm suggesting we become something greater, something they never expected. She walked back to her seat. The Conquered wants us to beg. They want us to kneel. They want to add us to their collection of broken species, stripped of pride and hope. She sat down and folded her hands on the table. I say we give them nothing, not our submission, not our dignity, not even the satisfaction of destroying us. I say we simply disappear, leave them wondering, leave them afraid. Her voice dropped lower. And then when we're ready, when we've built something they can't imagine, we come back. Not as beggars, not as conquerors, just as proof that they were wrong about us. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the silence of despair. It was the silence of people realizing that hope still existed. President looked around the table. We must vote. Do we accept the Conquered's terms and submit to their rule? Do we fight, knowing we cannot win? Or do we follow Commander Lee's plan and leave? The votes came one by one. Some voices shook, some were steady. A few people wept as they spoke. But in the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not beg. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would simply walk away. The next 36 hours were the most remarkable in human history. Across the solar system, hidden facilities came to life. Secret shipyards opened their doors. Vessels that had been built in darkness now prepared to carry the light of humanity to new shores. On Earth, the evacuation began. It was quiet, calm. People left their homes carrying only what mattered most: photographs, keepsakes, memories. They filed into shuttles that rose through clouds and alien shadows to reach the waiting ships above. 8 billion people moved as one. No panic, no chaos, just a species doing what it had always done best, surviving. Admiral watched from the bridge of the command ship as the last shuttles docked. Below him, Earth turned slowly, blue and green and beautiful. He had been born on that world. He had expected to die there. Now he would never see it again. All vessels report ready, Commander said from beside him. The fold drives are charged. We can leave whenever you give the order. Took one last look at his home. Send the Conquered our response, he said, then take us out of here. The message was simple. It contained no threats, no promises, no explanations. Just 3 words. We decline, goodbye. Then the stars themselves seemed to bend, space folded, light twisted. And humanity vanished. Overseer had conquered 17 worlds. He had crushed rebellions that lasted centuries. He had stood before dying civilizations and watched them beg for mercy with tears streaming down their alien faces. In 400 years of service to the galactic Conquered, he had never felt fear. Until now. He stood in the empty corridors of what had been humanity's largest moon base, his 4 arms hanging limp at his sides. The lights still worked. The air recyclers still hummed. Food sat untouched in the dining areas, meals prepared and never eaten. It was as if everyone had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of an ordinary day. Overseer, one of his officers approached, a young with crystalline skin and nervous eyes. We've completed the scan. The results are the same across the entire system. Already knew what the officer would say, but he asked anyway. Tell me. Nothing, sir. No humans, no bodies, no ships, no debris from battle or evacuation. They're simply gone. That's impossible. Yes, sir, but it's true. Walked slowly through the abandoned base. He passed sleeping quarters where beds were neatly made. He passed laboratories where experiments sat frozen mid-progress. He passed a children's classroom where drawings still hung on the walls, pictures of Earth, of stars, of futures that would never come. He stopped before one drawing. It showed a family, two parents and a small child, standing beneath a sky full of ships. Not conquered ships, human ships, ships flying toward a distant light. The child had written words beneath the picture in the simple letters of their language. His translator converted them instantly. "We are going home." He crumpled the paper in his fist. Back on his command vessel, called an emergency meeting with the other conquered leaders. Their holographic images filled the conference chamber, beings of crystal and shadow and light, the masters of 1,000 worlds, reduced now to confusion and something that looked terribly like fear. "How did this happen?" demanded Counselor of the. Her voice rang like breaking glass. "You told us they were primitives. You told us they had no capability for faster-than-light travel. You told us they were decades behind even the weakest conquered species." "They were," insisted, but even as he spoke, doubt crept into his voice. "Our scans showed no advanced technology, no hidden fleets, nothing that could explain. Nothing that could explain how 8 billion beings disappeared in 36 hours. Cut him off. How every single human across dozens of installations simply vanished without a trace. How they accomplished something that should be impossible." High Arbiter of the spoke next. He was ancient even by his species' standards, his body more machine than flesh, his mind sharp with 10,000 years of political experience. "The humans were clever," he said slowly, "more clever than we realized. They showed us what they wanted us to see. A primitive species, fighting among themselves, barely surviving in their own solar system. They played the role of children while secretly becoming something else entirely." "But what?" someone asked. "What could they have become? Where could they have gone?" Was silent for a long moment. Then he activated a display showing the energy readings from the moment of humanity's disappearance. "Our sensors detected a massive energy spike just before we lost track of them. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever technology they used, it's beyond our current understanding." He paused. "The humans didn't just leave their solar system. They left the galaxy entirely." The statement caused an uproar. "Impossible," the other leaders cried. No species had ever developed intergalactic travel. The distances were too vast, the energy requirements too extreme. It would take their fastest ships millions of years to reach the nearest galaxy. But simply pointed to the energy readings. "The evidence is clear. They found a way, and they used it to escape beyond our reach forever." The meeting ended without resolution. The conquered leaders returned to each carrying the same terrible knowledge. Humanity had outsmarted them. The primitive species they had planned to enslave had instead accomplished something that even the mighty galactic conquered could not do. And they had done it in secret, right under the conquered's nose. In the weeks that followed, the conquered tried to control the story. Official announcements claimed that the humans had destroyed themselves rather than accept membership, a final act of primitive stubbornness. The message was clear. This is what happens to species who refuse the conquered's guidance. But rumors spread anyway. Traders whispered about ghost ships seen at the edge of known space. Scientists reported strange energy signatures that matched the readings from humanity's disappearance. Explorers claimed to have found evidence of human activity in regions that should have been empty. And on 100 worlds, among 100 species, a new word began to circulate. A human word, adopted and adapted, spoken in quiet corners by those who had grown tired of the conquered's rule. The word was hope. Not everyone had escaped with the main human fleet. Some had chosen to stay behind. scientists studying the conquered from within, diplomats who had married into alien families, children born between stars who had never known Earth. They numbered perhaps a few thousand, scattered across conquered space like seeds waiting for spring. Among them was a young woman named O'Mira. Myra was 19 years old when humanity vanished. She had been studying engineering at a university, one of the few humans allowed to learn advanced technology under conquered supervision. When the news came that her species had disappeared, she was pulled from class and questioned for days. The conquered officials wanted to know if she had been part of the conspiracy, if she knew where her people had gone, if she could help them find the human fleet. She told them nothing, because she knew nothing, because the secret had been kept even from humans living in conquered space. But she remembered. As years passed and Myra grew into a woman, she held onto her memories of humanity. She remembered her mother teaching her to cook, her father telling her stories about Earth, a world she had never seen but always loved. She remembered the way humans laughed, the way they cried, the way they refused to give up even when everything seemed lost. And she watched, she listened, she learned. The thought she had accepted her place as a useful servant. They gave her jobs on research vessels, trusting her technical skills. They let her access data that most outsiders never saw. They never realized that she was searching. 20 years after humanity's disappearance, Myra made her first discovery, an energy reading at the edge of space, identical to the ones recorded when humans vanished. She filed it away, told no one, and kept looking. 30 years after the disappearance, she found something else. A planet in a distant system, supposedly barren, now showing signs of atmosphere and water. Something was terraforming it, shaping it to support life. And the technology being used matched nothing in the Concord's databases. 40 years after the disappearance, Myra was no longer searching alone. She had found others, descendants of humans who had stayed behind, raised in secret, carrying their heritage like a hidden flame. They formed a network, sharing information, protecting each other. And they all believed the same thing: humanity was coming back. Myra was 49 years old when she found him. Captain was the commander of a small trading vessel, officially a loyal servant of the conquered, secretly the leader of the largest human network in known space. His grandfather had been one of those who chose to stay, to watch, to wait. "I've found something," Myra told him when they finally met in person, in the cargo hold of his ship while it was docked at a remote station. "Something big." She showed him the data she had collected over 3 decades. The energy readings, the terraformed planets, the signs of construction at the galaxy's edge. Studied the information with eyes that had seen much but hoped for more. "They're out there," Myra said. "They've been building, growing, preparing." Her voice shook with emotion she had hidden for years. "And I think they're almost ready." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile Myra had seen from a human in longer than she could remember. "Then we need to be ready too," he said. "When they come back, they'll need people on the inside, people who know how the conquered works, people who can help." Myra nodded. "I've been waiting my whole life for this." So have we all. Turned to look out the cargo hold's small window at the stars beyond. So have we all. And somewhere beyond those stars, beyond the edge of the known galaxy, humanity continued to build its future. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting to come home. 50 years is a long time for most species. Governments rise and fall. Wars are fought and forgotten. Children become old and die, leaving only stories behind. But for the galactic conquered, 50 years was barely a heartbeat. Their civilizations had lasted. Their leaders measured time in centuries, and in those 50 years they had almost succeeded in forgetting humanity entirely. The official records listed humans as a failed species, destroyed by their own stubbornness. Young aliens learned about them in history classes, a cautionary tale about the foolishness of rejecting the Conquered's wisdom. The empty solar system where Earth once orbited became a training ground for new military officers, a reminder of what happened to those who the natural order. But some remembered. Overseer, now ancient beyond measure, had never stopped thinking about the humans. He had retired from active duty decades ago, but he kept files, notes, theories. He reviewed the energy readings from the day they vanished, searching for patterns he might have missed. He knew they were still out there. He knew they would return someday. And he was afraid. On the opposite side of the galaxy, Engineer O'Meara sat in the control room of a research station, monitoring sensors that reached to the edge of known space. She was 69 years old now, her hair gray, her face lined with time. But her eyes were still sharp, still watching, still waiting. The network she had built with Captain had grown over the decades. Hundreds of human descendants now worked throughout conquered space, hiding in plain sight, gathering information, preparing for a day they hoped would come. They called themselves the Watchers, and Myra was their leader. Tonight was like any other night. The sensors showed nothing unusual. The stars burned cold and distant. The Conquered went about its business, confident in its power, blind to what was coming. Then the readings changed. Myra sat up straight, her heart suddenly pounding. The sensors were detecting energy signatures at the galaxy's edge, signatures identical to the ones recorded 50 years ago when humanity vanished. But these were not fading echoes or distant memories. These were new, and they were getting stronger. "Oh no," she whispered, then despite everything she smiled. "Oh yes." She opened a secure channel to Captain, now 73 years old but still commanding his ship, still leading the Watchers. "Are you seeing this?" His voice came back immediately, trembling with emotion. "I see it, Myra, I see it." Across the galaxy, Conquered sensors began detecting the same readings. Alarms rang in military bases. Scientists scrambled to explain what was happening. Communications channels filled with confused reports and terrified speculation. Something was coming, something big. At the Conquered's capital, High Arbiter, the same leader who had analyzed humanity's disappearance 50 years ago, watched his screens with growing dread. He had warned the others. He had told them the humans might return. They had laughed at him, called him paranoid, reminded him that no species had ever developed true intergalactic travel. They were not laughing now. The energy readings grew stronger by the hour. Whatever was approaching was not slowing down. It was not trying to hide. It was coming directly toward the heart of conquered space, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Then came the message. It appeared on every screen in the galaxy simultaneously, every military display, every civilian device, every communication channel. The technology required to broadcast so widely should have been impossible. The Conquered controlled all major networks. No outside signal should have been able to reach them. But it did. A human face appeared. An old woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to look through the screen into the soul of every being watching. Behind her, visible through a vast window, was a sight that made even the most hardened Conquered officers gasp. Ships, not hundreds, not thousands, millions of ships emerging from a rift in space that burned like a wound in reality. They stretched beyond the edge of visible space, a wall of steel and light that dwarfed anything the Conquered had ever built. Each vessel was different, some massive carriers, some sleek fighters, some strange shapes that followed no known design principles. Together, they formed an armada that could have conquered a dozen galaxies. "This is Admiral Shin of the Terran Sovereignty," the old woman said. Her voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. 50 years ago, you offered humanity a choice, submit or perish. We chose neither." In the control room of her research station, Myra wept openly. Around her, other human descendants watched in stunned silence, tears streaming down their faces. For 50 years they had waited, hoped, believed. Now that hope had become real. Admiral Shin continued speaking. When we left, we were refugees, survivors fleeing from bullies who thought they could crush us simply because they were stronger. We had nothing but our ships, our dreams, and our refusal to surrender. She paused, and something like pride crossed her weathered face. In 50 years, we have built something new. The view behind her shifted, showing images that seemed impossible. Worlds terraformed from barren rock into gardens, space stations that orbited artificial suns, cities floating in the clouds of gas giants, schools where children learned without fear, hospitals where no one was turned away. A civilization not built on conquest or submission, but on the simple human belief that tomorrow could be better than today. We found new galaxies, Shin said. Billions of stars waiting for someone to reach them. We discovered technologies that the conquered never imagined. We grew. We learned. We became something greater than we were. Her expression hardened slightly. But we never forgot. We remember the ultimatum. We remember the threats. We remember being told that we had to choose between slavery and death. Her voice dropped lower. And we remember choosing to be free instead. Across conquered space, military commanders ordered their fleets to intercept the human armada. Ships launched from 1,000 bases, racing toward the galaxy's edge. They were the mightiest force the conquered had ever assembled, tens of thousands of vessels, crewed by the best soldiers from a dozen species. They arrived to find the human fleet simply waiting. No shots were fired. No demands were made. The human ships hung in space, silent and unmoving as if they had all the time in the universe. Admiral Shin's transmission continued. We are not here for revenge. We could destroy you, we have the power. We could conquer your worlds, enslave your species, do to you what you plan to do to us. But that is not who we are. That is not who we want to be. On his flagship, conquered Supreme Commander watched the human admiral with eyes that had seen centuries of war. He recognized what he was seeing. This woman was not making threats. She was not posturing. She was simply stating facts. And the facts were terrifying. We want nothing from you, Shin continued. Your resources, your technology, your approval. We rejected your galaxy and we built our own. We rejected your rules and we made better ones. We rejected your future and we created a future worth living. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes seeming to meet the gaze of every being watching. You expected us to beg, you expected us to crawl, you expected us to break. A small smile crossed her face. Instead, we simply moved on. The transmission showed the rift in space beginning to widen. The human ships were turning, preparing to leave. This message is not a threat, Shin said. It is not an offer of alliance or trade or peace. It is simply a farewell. We came back to show you what we became, to let you see what happens when you try to crush something that refuses to die. She stood taller. Humanity wishes the galactic conquered well. We hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in your empire of submission and fear, but we will not be part of it. We were never meant to be part of it. The rift pulsed with impossible light. We will not be visiting again. The transmission ended. On her research station, Myra activated her own communication device, one she had kept hidden for 50 years, waiting for this moment. Admiral Shin, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. This is Engineer O'Myra, leader of the Watchers. We've been waiting for you. There are thousands of us throughout conquered space. We're ready to come home. A moment of silence. Then a new voice came through, younger, warmer, filled with joy. Myra, this is Captain of the Rescue Fleet. We know about the Watchers, we've always known. The young captain laughed, a sound like music after decades of silence. We've been waiting for you too. All ships, prepare to receive our people. It's time to bring everyone home. And across the conquered, hidden humans emerged from the shadows. They boarded shuttles, flew toward the waiting fleet, embraced family members they had never met but always known. The conquered could only watch as its former captives slipped through their fingers, one by one, until none remained. Then the rift closed, and humanity was gone again, but this time they took everyone with them. The galactic conquered did not recover quickly from humanity's return. How could they? Everything they believed about the universe had been shattered in a single day. For 10,000 years, the conquered had been the supreme power in the galaxy. They had conquered or absorbed every species they encountered. They had built an empire on the simple principle that might makes right, that the strong rule and the weak serve. No one had ever challenged this truth. Then the humans came back, and without firing a single shot, without conquering a single world, without even raising their voices in anger, they had proven that everything the conquered believed was wrong. Supreme Commander resigned his position 3 days after the human fleet departed. He was 460 years old, and he knew he would not live much longer. But before he died, he needed to understand what had happened. He traveled to Earth's empty solar system, to the ruins of the moon base where he had first realized that humanity had escaped. He walked the same corridors he had walked 50 years ago, past the same abandoned classrooms, the same empty homes. And he found something he had missed before. In a small room hidden behind a wall panel was a message. A single piece of paper, written in human script, left for whoever might find it. His translator converted the words instantly. To whoever finds this, we are not running away, we are not giving up, we are simply choosing a different path. You wanted us to beg, but we don't know how. You wanted us to submit, but that's not in our nature. You gave us a choice between slavery and death. We chose freedom instead. Maybe someday you'll understand. Maybe someday you'll realize that power isn't measured in ships or weapons, but in what you build and who you become. Maybe someday you'll look up at the stars and wonder if we were right all along. Until then, goodbye. We hope you find peace. We hope you find happiness. We hope you find something worth living for besides conquest and fear. We certainly did. With respect and without regret. The humans who chose to hope. Read the message 3 times. Then he sat down on the dusty floor of the abandoned base and did something he had never done in 4 centuries of existence. He wept. On the other side of reality, in a galaxy the conquered would never reach, humanity celebrated its reunion. Engineer O'Meara stood on the observation deck of New Sol, the capital city of the Terran sovereignty. Through the transparent walls, she could see a world transformed, mountains and rivers and forests, all created from nothing by human determination and human science. Beside her stood Admiral Shin, now retired, her silver hair catching the light of an artificial sun. "It's beautiful," Myra whispered. "It is," Shin smiled. "When we first arrived here, this planet was a dead rock. No air, no water, just stone and silence. We looked at it and saw a home." "How long did it take?" 20 years to make it livable. Another 30 to make it beautiful." Shin turned to face her. "The conquered would have taken 1,000 years to do what we did in 50. They're so concerned with control and hierarchy that they've forgotten how to dream." Myra thought about the decades she had spent hiding, waiting, watching. "I used to wonder if you were really out there, if you were really building something, or if the stories were just wishful thinking." The stories were true, all of them. Shin gestured at the world beyond the window. "This is what humans do, Myra. When everything is taken from us, we build something new. When we're told something is impossible, we find a way. When we're cornered, we don't just survive, we transcend." The celebration continued for days. Humans who had been separated for half a century were reunited. Children born in exile met grandparents they had never known. Stories were shared, tears were shed, and for the first time in 50 years, humanity was whole again. But the work was not done. Captain led the effort to integrate the Watchers into their new society. It was not easy. The Watchers had spent their lives pretending to be something they were not, hiding their true selves to survive. Now they had to learn how to be fully human again. "It takes time," told Myra during one of their many conversations. "My grandparents were among those who escaped. They told me stories about what it was like before, the fear, the uncertainty, the desperate hope. They said the hardest part wasn't leaving. It was learning to believe that the future could be different." "And was it different, I mean?" Smiled, "Beyond anything they imagined, beyond anything any of us imagined." She showed Myra the records of what humanity had accomplished in 50 years of exile. They had colonized hundreds of worlds across 3 galaxies. They had developed technologies that made the Conquered's most advanced systems look primitive. They had created a society without poverty, without war, without the endless struggle for dominance that defined Conquered civilization. "We made mistakes," admitted, "plenty of them. We argued, we disagreed. Sometimes we failed," she shrugged. "But we never stopped trying, we never stopped believing that we could be better." "And now," Myra asked, "what happens now?" "Now we keep building, keep growing, keep exploring." Eyes sparkled with excitement. "There are billions of galaxies out there, Myra. Billions of stars we haven't seen. Billions of worlds waiting to be discovered. We could spend 1,000,000 years exploring and we'd barely scratch the surface." "But the Conquered—" "The Conquered is irrelevant." His voice hardened slightly. "They can't reach us. They can't threaten us. They can't even comprehend what we've become. We showed them mercy by letting them live. We could have destroyed them. We chose not to." "Why?" Was quiet for a long moment. "Because revenge would have made us like them. Because conquest is their way, not ours. Because the best victory isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so far beyond them that they simply don't matter anymore." She looked out at the stars. "We beat them by being better, by building something beautiful while they were still playing their games of power and submission, by proving that their way isn't the only way." She smiled. "And honestly, I think that hurts them more than any war ever could." 1,000 years passed. The galactic Conquered eventually collapsed, torn apart by the same forces of conquest and submission that had built it. Species that had served for rose up. Old empires crumbled. New civilizations were born from the ashes. And through it all, the legend of humanity persisted. Stories were told about the primitive species that had escaped the Conquered's grasp, about the fleet of impossible ships that appeared at the galaxy's edge, about the old woman who had looked into the eyes of the Conquered's masters and told them that humanity wished them well, and truly meant it. The story grew with each telling. Some versions said the humans had become gods, transcending physical form entirely. Others claimed they had created a paradise beyond imagination, a place where every being lived in perfect harmony. A few whispered that they were still watching, still waiting, ready to return if they were ever truly needed. In the archives of what had been the Galactic Conquered, a single entry remained. Status departed, threat level unknown. Last contact, cycle 7842. Notes: they were offered submission, they chose independence, they were expected to fail, they did not. Current location beyond known space. Do not pursue, do not engage, do not forget. And in a galaxy far from that old entry, on a world orbiting a star that had no name in any Conquered language, an old woman sat on a hillside and watched the sunset. Myra was 130 years old now. Human medicine had advanced far beyond what the Conquered had ever achieved, and she could have lived another century if she chose. But she was tired. Happy, but tired. She had seen enough. She had done enough. Her great-great-granddaughter sat beside her, a young woman named Shin, named for the admiral who had led humanity's triumphant return. Grandmother said, "Tell me the story again, the one about the Conquered." Myra smiled. "Haven't you heard it enough? I never get tired of it." The old woman looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear. Each one might be home to a human colony. Each one was proof of what her species had accomplished. Once upon a time, she began, there was a species called humanity. They lived on a small blue planet, circling an ordinary star, dreaming of the day they might touch the heavens. And then the aliens came, said, knowing the story by heart. Yes, the aliens came. They were powerful and ancient and certain of their own superiority. They looked at humans and saw servants, slaves, lesser beings to be controlled. But we weren't. No, we weren't. Myra took her great-great-granddaughter's hand. They expected us to beg. They expected us to kneel. They expected us to break. She squeezed gently. Instead, we simply turned our backs on them and walked away. We built our own future. We became our own destiny. And now, Myra looked at the young woman beside her, the future of humanity, beautiful and bold and unafraid. And now we keep going, keep building, keep dreaming. She smiled one last time. That's what humans do. That's what we've always done. That's what we'll always do. The stars burned bright above them, endless and eternal. And somewhere among them, humanity continued its journey, not as conquerors, not as refugees, but as something the universe had never seen before. Something wonderful, something free, something human.